Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to Around the Hearth. I'm Ann Richmond, aka Hearth Singer, the head bard in charge, and today we are doing Around the Hearth, which is a Hearth Singer Games tabletop RPG talk show. And today I am joined by my besties, Emily and Chris. Welcome back, guys.
Thanks.
Hello.
Good to be back.
It's good to have you back. I missed you. Do you have any wild tales to update us on in the meantime?
Like,
How have the last couple of weeks been for
like on
you?
topic, or
I mean, no. Doesn't have to be.
Well, we missed the Valentine's Day stream because we were having our wedding anniversary date.
we were.
Which I felt was appropriate.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They were like, so we know you just told everybody that we'll be here, but we definitely
Oh yeah.
we won't.
Yeah.
Well, first
we have
off,
good
we
reason,
lied
though.
to you,
Yeah.
and then we went to the movies.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah.
And so how was it? You guys went to a drive-in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you know that they're driving movie theaters in New York City?
There's like 3 of them.
I didn't.
I think there's
We
only
learned so
one now,
much
though.
here.
It was
was
pretty
cool.
great.
Yeah.
It's
They
also
were-
like the only way you can go see a movie right now. So
But
highly
I-
recommend it.
Yeah,
as a
solid.
New York City native, it was the first drive-in movie I'd ever been to ever. So it was an experience for me, for sure.
We saw
That's
10
cool.
Things I Hate About You.
Mhm.
Oh my god, that really takes me back.
Yeah,
It
did.
actually holds up pretty well. There's just like
does.
2 or 3 problematic moments, like the ones that you always have when you're watching a movie
Mhm.
that's from like the 90s or early 2000s. Well, I think
you're
the
like, wow,
ones from the
that's-
2000s are kind
Yeah.
of movies, but
That's super racist.
Yeah,
like, or like,
it's-
wow, that is not the most feminist
yeah,
thing
like
you could ever
ooh,
do.
Yeah,
that's
it's-
a little homophobic. Yeah, that like there's a
Yeah.
little bit of that.
There weren't too many like no homos, but
Yeah.
but there was a few like unfortunate word choices that were just sort of part of
mhm.
like the vocabulary of kind of everyone at the time, and so like
Yeah.
not okay, but
Honestly, the part to me that is like that holds up the least, that's the biggest like is the whole like plot element where Julia Stiles flashes her gym teacher and soccer
Ugh.
coach to get what's his name out of detention.
yeah, Heath Ledger. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm the thing that shocked me.
Spoilers, sorry if no
Oh.
one's if
Spoilers.
you haven't
For-
seen
Spoilers
10
for
things
this
I hate
movie.
about
For
you.
a 22-year-old teen drama.
R.I.P. Heath Ledger.
Yeah,
as
actually,
no one
though,
else says in chat.
He's great.
And also,
He's still great. But I will say that it was weird to harken back to a time where Julia Stiles was the it girl.
the it girl.
Remember,
yeah.
like when we couldn't get enough of Julia Stiles, and then she remember that dance she did in Save the Last Dance, and we all thought it was
Yeah.
cool. But you look at it now, and you're like, you're an embarrassment.
Yeah.
Is that true? I don't know. I had a
Yeah.
huge crush on Julia Stiles.
I mean,
and
everyone did.
I think
Everyone
I
did.
still
didn't?
do.
Yeah.
But like,
yeah.
I don't know if the crush is on Julia Stiles or if it's on Julia Stiles' character in
Or like,
10 Things I Hate About You,
Yeah,
or just like
that character, that very
the
specific.
idea
or the idea
of,
of
Julia
Julia-
Stiles.
Well,
The
the
concept.
concept of Julia Stiles.
we all have like the crush on that very like it girl from the 90s,
Yeah.
the like grunge feminist badass.
She didn't
like-
give
Yeah.
a damn about what you thought
She didn't
about
Did-
her.
yeah.
She really
And
did.
She played guitar and
Did she
and
though?
drove a vintage car.
Did she-
And
True.
she had the audacity
Mhm.
to love poetry.
Yeah, she read Sylvia Plath like
And
Like nobody's
she
business.
loved like chick music, like 90s chick
That's
music.
true.
that's
And-
true.
Thank you
I
so
love her.
much. Jar Jar Messiah just began following us,
Sure.
and I just have to say that I love you and I love your name.
Well, he is the Messiah.
And I also want to say hello over to Coin Digger on the YouTube chat who's watching. Welcome. Most of our questions are coming from over on Twitch if you do feel like joining us there, but stick around. We're excited to have everybody on all the platforms. We don't pick and choose. We're everywhere. We are your everywhere. And in fact, I know it's shocking given the title of this podcast, which is about welcoming new or beginner players to D&D, that we are not going to spend the entire time talking about Julia Stiles and 10 Things I Hate About You
But, like-
and Save the Last Dance and also
Oh, I was gonna
Did you
say
remember
oh.
Oh?
I remember oh.
Yeah,
No.
let's not talk about
Let's not talk about oh. Easily,
So
10 things easily the
yeah,
better Shakespeare
analog.
analog, yeah.
Yeah. But we're gonna talk about. It's been about a month since we chatted about D&D together. But this topic is how to make beginner players feel welcome. And I'm really excited to talk about it because 5th edition was built with new players in mind, creating a larger balance between like robust mechanics of previous iterations of the game and then a more cinematic storytelling approach and an easier in point. It's kind of a follow-up, a happy medium between 3.5 and 4.0, which is not the subject of today's of today's podcast.
But I would like to
Quickly
talk
adding
about
that to our list
Yeah.
of future.
Yeah, go ahead and
communication
add it to the Google.
I'll add it to the Google sheet.
Listen, man, for a time,
this
I
very
really
serious.
liked 4th edition. You know, like we've
We
all
did.
learned.
We
we've
all played
moved
it together.
past that, but it did a lot of things right.
It's true. It's true. And what's up, Eleanor DiLorenzo? Welcome, welcome, welcome.
She wants you to
so
haze us, I think.
Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like I think I'm gonna get hazed.
Who's
Like if
being
anyone's
hazed?
gonna get hazed, it's gonna be me. But on my own channel, nonetheless. But yeah, I think 5th edition played a huge role in the resurgence of popularity of D&D that we've seen over the last few years. Queen of Stolen Hearts, it's me, Coin Digger. Welcome over here to the fun. Yeah, this game is so much a part of our lives at this point, and by that I certainly mean me and Emily and Chris. But it's really important to think back and remember like what it felt like to learn it for the first time. So that's where I wanted to start after I say thank you to Caldefron46 for that 6 sub. So what do you guys remember about being a new player? Let's start there.
Personally,
Yeah.
I don't know. As I said before, like I started playing in college, and a big thing that my friend did, which I did with a lot of players that I was trying to introduce, is didn't so much as like present the game to me as like a collection of rules, but more or less just like gave me sample scenarios or experiences that they'd had, much like a highlight reel, to sort of like hype me up to the idea of the possibility of what could happen. Yeah, and just like sort of spinning all these hypotheticals and like combos and epic moments.
Yeah.
And so that was a big part of it. I was just sort of like I liked playing my character, but early on I just sort of became a little addicted to like the math of it all, because I was never like a min-maxer per se, but like I played a monk and I got like addicted to like how many attacks I could squeeze into a turn.
Totally.
Just because I thought that was really fun. Like the in my mind, like the way that things played out in my mind's eye was like addictive. And so I would just, even when I wasn't playing, I would just like imagine scenarios about like what I could do next time I was at the table. And once again, these weren't all combat oriented, but that was like I kind of remember my first high when it came to the game. But that's just
the first hit's free, Chris.
Yeah, it's true.
The first monk's free.
Yeah, the first monk's free, and then he died.
And then, well, not so free because you paid with sadness. Did you fear dying as a new player? Like, was that the worst thing you could imagine happening to your character?
No, not necessarily, but like I'd never really experienced that portion of the game. Like it was brand new, so like I didn't know, like the limits of my mortality were not clear. You know, like you start to play a video game and you can instantly suss out like how often you're going to be dying and how forgiving the game is going to be to your mistakes. And D&D is very similar. And so like I didn't really even ever think about my character dying, and frankly my character dying was entirely out of my control, because it was due to a like Leroy Jenkins moment for a member of my party that just kind of went really south, and I happened to be too close to his negligence.
To be in the epicenter.
Yeah, and then it was kind of like a save or die sort of situation, and he saved and I did not. And that's
rough.
And that's kind of how it happened. But I would definitely not say that I feared death, because I didn't really know where it was, you know.
Well, and so Emily, what do you remember about being a new player?
Well, I am trying to think back. and I don't have like a super solid memory
Mhm.
like specific to our very first time playing D&D. But if I could reference something that I think will assist me in explaining my take on this,
Yeah.
I have to I have to cast everyone's attention instead to a different game, which is the game of World of Warcraft. And I bring this up because definitely WoW was my initiation into like fantasy role-playing games. And so I think a lot about a story that Chris tells me, because like I think everyone who has ever played WoW does have a very vivid memory of like their starting interactions with WoW, like with like playing their character in the starting zone and like getting used to that and experiencing like riding the Griffin for the first time or entering Stormwind for the first time, or those things really do stick with you in a very
They
visceral
really
way.
do.
And I think Chris tells a story about how the friend that got him, and I'm just gonna like you're here, but I'm gonna tell a story. Chris,
Okay, I'll just correct you if it's wrong.
don't do that. Chris tells a story about how the friend that got him into WoW played a warlock and then like taught Chris how to summon his warlock summons by like taking him down to the depths of like the crypt where like basically like turn it into this big fancy RP experience, which like is not required, right? But for Chris, that was his like introduction to the class of warlock. And then there's a certain element of you where based on how the people that are excited about the game around you play the game, you get ingrained in your brain like that's how the game is played. So like you show Chris that this is how the warlock has to do their summons, and it's like that's how I do it every time I go down to the crypts and I say the words and I summon the thing, and like that's way more epic than what actually happens, right?
Totally.
So I bring that story up because I think for me getting into and you can probably relate to this since our introductory experiences with D&D were under the game mastery tutelage of Chris here, is that the way that the GM or the person getting you into the game gets excited about the game or the things that they're focused on are what stick with you about what's exciting about playing. So like I, despite what Chris is saying about like the math being the exciting thing for him to play, I don't think he ever proposed D&D to either of us as like it's this cool math game. Like definitely whenever like we were being introduced to D&D, that's not a thing that he leaned into, because he knows you and I are storytellers, and so like the focus is much more on like build your character and make it as cool as you want and do like let's figure out how to do the things you want to do with your character and tell the story that you want to tell. And he leaned really hard into the lore and like getting us invested in the story of it. And then when combat came along, it was very much like, oh, here's a bunch of math that we suddenly have to do. So I guess like my biggest memory of starting to play D&D was like focusing on building the character and the story that grounded what the characters were doing, because that's how our GM presented it as an exciting thing to do.
For sure. And I think, for me, it was honestly, I was really nervous. When I think back to like in high school, the very first game I ever played, where a friend's brother was like running it for just me and her on a weekend in high school. And I remember being super nervous about how much I had to prepare and like would I remember where to look on my character sheet. It all seemed like very overwhelming. Caught between wanting to when it came to wanting to run games as a beginner, I felt really caught between wanting to do original stories or take on pre-written content. Like I wasn't sure whether, a campaign or an adventure path would be right for me. Would I be like good enough in order to entertain the people who were usually my DMs, which, if Chris is at the table, I want to make sure that I live up to his enthusiasm that he brought us into the game with. Could I be a leader at the table? Like, would rules just fall out of my head, whether as a player or a DM? And so now that we've kind of set the scene for like, I guess like the good, the bad, and the ugly of what it's like to be a beginner. Like, let's say in a world where we're inviting a new player, a beginner to the table, we're going to talk about it from two perspectives. We're going to talk about what do you think a dungeon master can do to make that process fun and handle some of the fears and anxiety that we just talked about, and then we'll talk about what can other players do in order to help that person feel welcome. So you guys go first.
Yeah. I was so generally what I do as a DM to try to help people out with that is I just sort of try to make the material relatable, so it's like, okay, so we're gonna play D&D, it's like, fantasy a la Lord of the Rings, whatever your fandom is. But then I always ask the person, I'm not just like, well, here, you could be a dwarf, or you could be an elf, and you can be a warlock and a wizard. I don't like throw all those options at them. It's more about like, casting the net wide and then narrowing it down, right? So I always say to people, most people are in the Lord of the Rings, although tailor it to whatever fandom is your in. But like, I'm always just like, okay, so like, what kind of character do you like to play normally? Like, oh no, sorry, what kind of character do you normally empathize with? Like, if you're watching Lord of the Rings, like, who's your favorite character? Do you like Legolas or Aragorn or Gimli? Like, what member of the Fellowship do you empathize with? Who do you wish you had their powers? Who do you think is the coolest person? And then just like based on that kind of thing, you can narrow it down. Now, most people are like, oh, Aragorn, I love Aragorn. And I was like, okay, well, Aragorn is a ranger. It's like, so then it's like, okay, well, do you want to sit there and plink people from far away? Like, do you want to shoot arrows like like a hyper accurate elf, or do you want to get up in the thick of things and chop up urukai with your long sword and short sword, and just kind of go through that process like that? And I sort of avoid, and this maybe has come with the fact that I've been, a lot of the players that I've introduced in recent years, you guys included, ever since then, I more like approach it from a narrative perspective, where I'm just like, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of the rules. I just want to know what you would like your character to be good at, and what you don't really care if they're good at, and like what sort of category they fall into. Are they like stealthy or whatever else?
And conversely, I think it's a lot of this is for me as a dungeon master, trying to understand what kind of person they are. Like, what is their communication style? What is their learning style? You won't always know, but there are absolutely going to be those people who don't want you to break it down for them. They're going to want to like have the agency to take the book and go sit in a corner and look at the art and think about what they want. And so some of it is like figuring out whether it's a person that you want to start breaking that stuff down for and helping them along the path, or recognize that for them, part of the game is that they want ownership over all the choices. So you're just going to have to let them go into a dark room and have a fantasy for a little bit and come back.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I think your example is much more common, but I just want to make space for that other.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like sometimes I'm like, here's the book, go, and then they'll come back with a 10-page backstory and a fully filled out character sheet ready to hit the ground running, and that's cool too if you have an opinion. But a lot of people that I've introduced to the hobby are like low-key nerds, so like they don't have, like, they've read Harry Potter growing up, they watched Lord of the Rings, they loved Game of Thrones, etc., and sometimes not even that. And so a lot of times it's like, just breaking down the world into more relatable terms as like an entry point.
I also think another thing that it can be good to do, depending on the table and the people involved, is give each new person, if you have multiple people, someone that they're comfortable with at the table to be like your DM backup informant to help with decision making during combat, because combat is a time where, whether you have new players or not, that the DM has a lot of responsibility and a lot of like multitasking to do, and so depending on your feeling about having somebody, you obviously don't want a backseat DM, but it can be really helpful if you're like, oh, this person just played a monk, and they might be able to help you figure out what to do, and then you can keep focusing on everybody else, so the whole thing doesn't just like grind to a halt and make it feel like the Eye of Sauron has just turned on the new player when it's their turn, and then their turn takes twice as long as anybody else. Do you have any thoughts about what DMs can do to make things better, Emily?
I sorry, I got distracted for a second there, because yay for those subscriptions from Bard and Barbarian.
Subs. Thank you so much. Thank you for the follow, Queen of Stolen Hearts, and thank you for those gifted suds. Suds?
Thanks for the yummy suds.
Love those suds. Thank
Bard
you.
and Barbarian.
Bard and Barbarian, who did an awesome guest spot on this show last week. So you guys should check out the VOD.
What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So my answer to this question, I feel, is a little unique in that to answer a question from chat, I haven't really ever GM'd anything. Like I think I DM'd one shot once when we were doing an experiment where we were all like, let's all try DMing one shots for each other. And I remember that it involved a giant gelatinous cube. And that's really all what I do remember is that my experience was not great because, like, at the end of the day, I literally threw out all the stats for the gelatinous cube because I was so much more interested in what all the players wanted to do. And like, I know that to a degree that's like a part of the like magic that happens behind the screen, but I also feel like I would do that in literally every fight, and so none of the math would matter because I'd just be like, and then what do you do?
And then it happens.
Yeah.
I remember that one shot though, and we fought a dragon, and it was very epic.
Yeah.
So
Oh, really cool.
it clearly wasn't that important, you know, like that worked.
Yeah, I guess. But I think my answer is really in line with kind of what you were saying, Anne, in that like the GMs do contribute to like making the new players feel at ease and can definitely, in the same way we were talking about before, like in terms of framing the experience from the get-go and also in terms of guiding them through the experience of playing. I think the fellow players at the table, and we do this quite a lot because we've played in multiple campaigns where there's usually at least one or two new person at the table. We kind of also take on some of that work of helping to guide the new people in figuring out how to use their abilities, or kind of helping to establish those instincts of, here's what you would do in this scenario. And oh yeah, I've played a monk, so I remember how this ability worked. Or I think, yeah, it's a team effort. And I also feel like there's like a meme out there that I'm not going to quote accurately. That
the off-brand meme is
the off-brand meme is that it's like the image of like the epic like adventurers, and it's like my first D&D character, and then like it's like images of like disaster, you know, like sword wielding weirdo, like chicken holding, like it's just like people that are just doing whatever weird crazy things they want, and it's like my 12th D&D character or whatever, with the idea that like when you start out, you maybe have a very clear vision for how epic and awesome you want it to be, and then after you've played a couple of characters, you're much more interested in just like doing your own thing, or like finding the quirks or the flaws and just kind of leaning into them. So to that end, and I'm not saying everybody should do this or that this is the right way, but I think my instinct with a new player to kind of help them acclimate is like prioritizing what they want to play, because I always like I have played the things I want to play at least once before, and I will have other chances to play things I want in the future probably, but in this case, like when we're all kind of like picking our classes or what our character archetypes are going to be or whatever, like what do you want to do? Let's make sure you're doing the thing you want to do, and then I'm gonna like I'll like if that person like really wanted to be a bard, amazing, let's make you the bardiest bard that you can and want to be. And I have like, I as a human am not drawn to barbarian, but you know what, that's what's left, so I'm gonna play the barbarian and like help hype up your experience, because this is like I understand the mechanics and I can make this character fun for me. You're going to be navigating so many new things and new elements, and I want to make sure that that feels comfortable for you. So like pick the thing that gives you joy, and then let's support it.
I think another thing that's really hard, but is like related to what players can do versus DMs can do to help at the table, is like I did mention earlier, like having somebody to help with different combat things can be great, but also knowing when to shut up. That is something that I really struggle with, because it can be way too much. They're like getting all this information and you're genuinely trying to help, but you have to learn like to recognize the signs that somebody's being like overstimulated and completely overwhelmed, and to just kind of fade to black on your participation and let the DM kind of guide them.
Yeah, overcorrecting is rough, and especially if you have like one new player at a table with all experienced players and the DM, there tends to be like tons of crosstalk because everyone likes to be the person who has the answer, right? I've been at many a table where it's just like the new person just gets bombarded with tons of like corrections and over explanations like that.
Yeah,
you know,
it's totally true.
I wanted to say real quick though that my next character is a loaf of bread held by Mage Hand.
Amazing. I'm so glad you're passionate about that.
We'll
find a way to work it in.
He'll never play character. It's fine.
It's fine. Let's go back because there are a bunch of things that are coming through the chat that are great questions, and I encourage you guys to ask us questions, and I will feed them through to the besties.
I want to say real quick that I did see a lot of people, before we go through the questions in a granular sense, I see that a lot of people are just sort of saying that, like, you know, what's a good beginner class? What system would you not have people play? Things like that. And it's just general, at least in my opinion, the quick piece of advice there is that like rules, rules heavy games, just like if the players aren't in there to like min max and get into the math of it, I find that anything that is just like overly verbose can just be overwhelming. You know what I mean?
Getting into something, I think,
keep it simple.
Depending on what people like at the table, finding a rules light system like Dread, where you're literally playing with a stack of Jenga blocks, can be really helpful. Obviously, not great for these life and times that we're in right now because you can't play Jenga. But if you do get to that point, that's a great kind of entryway because everyone is only burdened by their ability to play Jenga and their ability to make choices. Another one is 10 Candles, where
that's what I was gonna say. Yeah,
mechanic is really really simple, and it's all about helping make choices for each other and develop characters. Emily, if you want to talk about why you think it's great, please.
Yeah, I was gonna say the reason why 10 Candles pops into mind is because it's heavily narrative based, but with still stakes and like some like a ticking bomb that the players have to work around. I have always really loved the way that you run 10 Candles games, and with like having us really lean into the way our backstories integrate with one another, and like have those recorded messages that we share at the end. Like to me, that's a great way to get people thinking about narrative gameplay before you overload them with rules.
I like lots of rules, you know what I mean? Like I like that granular element of it. And so the burden that I normally take on for myself, it's just like, you know, you got a new player at the table. The thing that I always see new players do is that I'm like, okay, it's your turn. Or you know, I'm giving you the floor for one reason or another. What do you want to do? And they just pick up their character sheet and they stare at it. And I'm just like, the answer's not in there. Like,
they can't help.
Yeah, you're staring at the character sheet like it's a list of like things you can do, and you can only pick from that list. And it's like that's just a framework. That's just a bunch of math that you add to the thing. And I was like, just tell me what you want to do, and I'll make it happen in the rules. Like, filter that through me. And
I would say another like, oh sorry, go ahead.
No. I'm just saying like that. It's just like, you know, in said social encounter, said combat encounter, it doesn't matter. It's just like, you know, you have a general idea of what your character is capable of. We built it, all that stuff. So just tell me what you want to do, and I will frame it within the concept of
that's why, like,
probability.
I also really love Lady Blackbird as a starter system, because I think it's a really good balance of you build a character, there's rules, there's guidelines, but it is, again, it's definitely one of those things where staring at your character sheet is not going to provide the answers for you. It's only going to help facilitate how you make your answers happen. So I've done a lot of starter campaigns with Lady Blackbird as the basis. A lot of the games that I've played with people who have never played RPGs are built in Lady Blackbird, and it's such a great introductory system to just get people comfortable with the combination of rules and role playing at the same time, and it can put so many fun skins on top of it too.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to mention is Free League Publishing has Alien, the RPG. It has Vassin, which Eleanor DiLorenzo, who was in chat earlier, runs a game of Vassin as an actual play podcast that I am in that puts out episodes every week. So I'll throw the link in chat in a second. But they also do Tales from the Loop. And that is another great beginner system because it's very simple, very narratively driven. And there's if somebody likes one of those kind of topics, whether you want to play an alien like horror survival game or you want to explore the mystic north and with some Nordic horror and mystery and folk tales with Vassin, or you want to be, you know, kids on bikes basically, or play more of a Stranger Things-esque game with Tales from the Loop, it's there for you. And they're about to do a Kickstarter. Again, hashtag not sponsored, just informed. But they're about to do a Kickstarter of a new One Ring themed game in the Lord of the Rings universe. So there's a lot of great stuff to pull from, and if you like one of those systems, they all pretty much translate across. Not perfectly, but they're all very related to how they run. So that can be a great way to get your mind into different types of games without having to do too much. I wanted to go back to a question, Chris, that you had kind of picked out from folks, and I've now lost in the chat, so I'm so sorry. But it's about what kind of classes are great beginner classes and ones that can be more challenging. I think this is something that can be very confusing to people. But before we get into it, I want to start by saying when those subs were gift-a-roonied, a giveaway was unlocked.
Oh,
and
sweet.
So while we answer this question, you guys can enter the giveaway by typing the word beginner into chat, and subscribers have twice as much opportunity to win as anybody else, but all you have to do to enter is type the word beginner into chat. The winner will receive one of the D&D Beyond books on either the Grung, the Tortles, or God, what's the other one? There's the fish folk. I can't remember what they're called because I'm a fake nerd.
Kuatoa?
Yeah, Kuatoa. Yeah, so those three support books are available. I will let the winner choose whichever one of those they want, and I will get it to them after stream.
Is it they need to type beginner in the chat? Is that what it is?
They just need to type beginner in the chat.
I was going to answer a question, but I'm not gonna because it's about to get spammed with beginners.
I mean, it already has been.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
the idea is that we are going to answer questions while they type beginner in the chat. And if somebody here who is on our Discord would like to go over to the Discord and let them know that there is in fact a giveaway, feel free to do so. But if you're here, you're here. And when you're here, you're family.
Aww.
So let's talk about these beginner classes. Pick out something, each of you, that you think would be good.
Yeah, well, like, what class would be a beginner class?
Yeah, what class would be a good beginner class?
I mean, I'm still sort of like sticking to the mantra that like keep it simple, keep it safe when it comes to beginner stuff. So like I would always say that pick a class that is low on choices, like, right, unless that's what you want. Because so like for example, everything but like arcane spellcasters get to pick new spells every single day, and that can be really overwhelming as opposed to just being like, this is my spell, you know, there are many like it, but this one is mine.
Yeah.
But
so choices like that are bard and sorcerer, that like these are my spells.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And so like sorcerers and but like druids, for example, have a lot going on. What a time to be alive if you like picking spells every 5 seconds. But and once again, whatever, you know, live your bliss. But I would for starters, I would go with something simple. Like if you want to go ranged, go with like a ranger or a ranged fighter, or if you want to go melee, then go a fighter. You know, you have a few choices. You don't have to make them very often. You're effective at the things that you pick yourself to be good at.
I also think like even within the sort of intermediate stuff, like I would Know It All in chat has said Monk's action economy can
100%.
be tough to follow in the beginning. There are subclasses that are easier than others as well. So if the person is like dead set on being a druid, right? Or dead set on like the idea I have in my mind is a wizard. There are ways to help them make choices within that class
Yeah.
that are not as nuts and hard to deal with
Yeah.
mechanically. So yeah.
Yeah, but like even some people will be like, rogue, that seems simple, but rogues have lots of like Trixie's action economy options. And every new player I've ever known who's all like, I just want to be a rogue because I just want to stab people and steal their money. And I'm like, okay, cool, be a rogue. And then
be a fighter, man.
No, I know. Fighters don't sleep on fighters, man. They literally can do anything.
Yeah.
But
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, like, I think all the recommendations for starter classes are always like super fighty for that exact reason. And I am going to put my coin in the hat. That's not a metaphor.
it's okay. It's getting away from you. It's fine.
You're on my channel. You can make whatever metaphors you want.
I'm gonna go ahead and
My
slip
dearest
that
love.
coin into the hat of sorcerer, because I think sorcerer is a great selection for a starting class if you, like me, are a human who enjoys a little magic in your fantasy games. Like if something like adding flavor to the moveset of like a barbarian or a fighter is not super exciting or engaging to you, I think sorcerers can be complicated if you build them to be complicated, but like
100%.
you can just make a like sorcerers are amongst magic users some of the easiest to just get the hang of, and like from the get-go you're gonna feel like you're a magic-y person with a fireball that you can do things with, you know what I mean? Like it instantly creates that flavor that I think a lot of like magic lovers like myself have when they think of like, I am a powerful person in a fantasy game.
Yep, 100%. No, I endorse that 1,000 times over.
Another recommendation I have, which is it depends on the person, but I really think paladins are great because you can lean into their martial aspect, or you can pick spells, and you do get to pick spells every day, but it's less important that you do because most of the time you're going to be using those to smite anyways, so you'll have plenty of options. You won't have as many options as like a classic arcane class or a cleric might have spell-wise, but you do get kind of a taste of both worlds, which can be really nice. And ultimately, paladins are primarily pretty easy in combat, and you get that serotonin reward with a paladin when you hit because you can just do so much.
My players have picked paladins at the lowest occurrence because I've found that new players tend to be afraid of paladins because they're the only class that explicitly tells you that they have to be played a certain way.
I don't think they do.
I think they've eliminated those rules.
Have they eliminated? Well, the thing, the oaths. Like the oaths, I found that from like a role-playing perspective, people are like, well, I want to play paladin. The abilities sound cool, but I don't want to be a character that does X. And so it's about you can change that around because nothing's real. You can do whatever you want.
Nothing's real.
No,
it's a game.
it exists in your imagination.
But I also think it's important, as someone who has played now a few paladins, I think there are so much like cleric has different paths that they can choose. I think it's important to be able to sell a bunch of different types of paladin oaths and what it could mean.
100%.
And because pairing different oaths with different gods can get you literally any combination of how to play.
I sold paladin on a player first game they'd ever played, and they really wanted to play a druid. And I was just kind of like letting them know what they were getting themselves into. I wasn't like discouraging their choice, but I was letting them know what they were getting into as far as the kind of choices they would have to make, the kind of capabilities they would have. And so once I started explaining that, they were sort of getting a little lukewarm on it, but I sold them on Oath of the Ancients Paladin hard because it was just the same aesthetic that they wanted as their druid, except a little easier to play, and had like, lots of cool bonuses and things like that. So I thought that was a triumph of mine because normally people don't want to play paladins.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot to like about a lot of different classes. The overall takeaway I think is avoid unless they really want to play it, I would say avoid something like a cleric or a druid where there is just so much choice all the time. But if they really want to play it, you can help them down the path. Like, the truth is they should play what they're passionate about. But if they seem like somebody who's really nervous about mechanics, then pointing them towards somebody who, especially in combat, is going to have a pretty prescribed group of abilities or abilities that really ramp up over time and can grow with them is important. And if you start pretty much any class at level 1 instead of starting people at level 3, I mean, it's literally built in the game to teach you all the different aspects.
You have literally very little that you can do with your turn.
Yeah.
Purposefully.
So let's move on to another question here. Hold on, I have all of my questions pre-created because that's who I am. We talked about what players can do. So what can you do? Let's talk about the other side of the table. What can you do to make a beginner DM feel good at the table? Because I think that's an important conversation.
Wait, say that one more time.
So let's say it's somebody who's decided to be a dungeon master for the first time. What can you do to make their lives easier?
I have a good one.
I will share it.
I have a really good one. Sorry to keep going first, but
no, be passionate about it.
So, as a longtime DM and someone who's introduced a lot of new people to the game, if you want to be the holy grail for a DM, just know what your character can do. And by that I mean is just like just try to memorize what your abilities are, and at level 1 there's not a ton of them. Try to just kind of memorize what your abilities are and like what dice you're going to be using, and just sort of get that sorted out in your head. So when your turn comes up, you at least know what options are available to you. Because I'm more than happy to do all of like the background math and help translate your instincts into reality. But trying to just like kind of not doing like that little bit of homework beforehand to sort of just learn what your character is capable of before you sit down at the table can pay dividends, especially for the DM. And it also, that slows the game down a bit. But just kind of go over your abilities, and just, even if you don't know exactly how they're going to play out at the table, just know that like, during combat, I can do this, I can do this instead of a movement action. These are the skills I'm trained in. I know I'm good at these 4 or 5 skills, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I would say be comfortable with like improving some good like tavern or fireside RP. I think a lot of times, like especially someone who's new to GMing, they may go in the direction of over preparing and having too much content to do in one session, but you also, it's a lot of work. So there are going to be circumstances where there's just like they've wildly guessed wrong what the timing is going to be like. So I'm not saying like fill the time, but I am saying don't rush through content. Like if you're given a scene where the characters are in a tavern in like one of your first sessions, don't be like, okay, great, and then what happens? Like use that as an opportunity to either RP with each other, with the other players, or to investigate some of the NPCs, or order some fun food, or give the DM breathing room to really like live in the world they're building for you, and show you as players and as characters what that world looks like, and interact with it so that all that work is worth something. And it also helps space out the content that they've prepared, so you're not just rushing forward for the next combat.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful to investigate the world that's being presented to you, because like as a GM, like I made you a nice present, and I would like you to unwrap it, and I would like you to break it and toss it around and like have a good time in it. The worst feeling in the world is like, I'm going to call my players out in one of my games right now. I have a firm belief that every D&D player is a horse girl. And there is a moment in every campaign that you get to choose your mounts or your pets or whatever it's going to be.
That's true facts.
And I presented in my Horde of the Dragon Queen campaign, I was like, I'm going to write in like a whole thing. They go on a caravan. They get to like get their own cart and their own horses, like all this stuff. And I was just like, can you please like let me paint you a word picture from my mind palace? And they were just kind of like, yeah, we get 4 horses. And I was like,
How dare you?
Don't you want to know what colors they are?
Maximum
and what
disrespect.
breeds, and whether they have flowers braided in their manes and what all of their temperaments are? Throws away randomizing tables out the window. Like, they wanted nothing
Throws
to do
away
with that.
book you wrote about these horses and their lineage.
Yeah, for real. It's just so silly. So yeah.
I've had very similar things happen where this is my advice for new players is that the players have the new players have a tendency, and all players have a tendency to assume that if you don't point it out, then it doesn't exist in the game world yet. And the thing is that there's no fog of war. Like the game is there for you to explore. I will paint you this picture, and then I want you to probe into it. And so it's like some of the best things that have ever happened in any of my D&D campaigns is when the player invented something that I didn't introduce into the scene, and then they're like, is there a blah over there? Yes, of course there is, because you have an idea with that, and if there isn't one, then I'm a bad DM. I mean, obviously, whatever, there's caveats, but probe into that world. Like if you're sitting in that tavern, if you don't really want to like talk to the RP with your friends, but if you don't really want to, just invent a reality of what you think might be there in your mind's eye, and help the DM flesh that all out.
And I think that's really important too, because so much of what, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but like I enjoy the improvised aspects of D&D. So much of being a DM is about being prepared and about planning, that it can sometimes feel like, well, now they've gotten here and they're going to interact with it, I guess, but it's mostly written. Like the best thing you can do sometimes for me is be like, I want to talk to the barmaid, or like I want to do something, I want to investigate this NPC that you've introduced me from the book, and then I get to build out more and to have these characters that I get to create in the moment and have a little stamp on and remember with fondness. And so those are things I really like when people kind of investigate in the world. Now, Worlds of Enzo asked a great question. It's a slight divergence from this topic. But they say, if a new player has a really rock solid idea, but no direct translation to core mechanics in the books, would you recommend a homebrew as an option to start them off with?
Personally, I think that there's a way to get there. I mean, like for a new player, I mean, like you could make a homebrew, but like, I don't know, I feel like that requires like some talking beforehand. You can work that out. You know what I mean? But if it's like last minute, I've always found like the best analog and be like, well, we can build to it. You're not going to get it at like, I want to be Geralt of Rivia, right? Okay, me too. But like maybe not at level 1.
But maybe relax.
Yeah, but like maybe not at level 1.
Geralt of Rivia didn't want to be Geralt of Rivia at level 1.
No, exactly. He was at least level 12. So like, and he multi-classed a few times. It's it's fine. But so
I think.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, also. I'll be the first person to be like, screw the rules. But at the same time, if you were learning a game, like having a footing in what how the game is meant to be played is at least helpful to encourage you to grow the hobby and to like take what you've learned at this table and bring it to the next table. I think like we all suffer a little bit because of having played 3.5 and 4th edition, where we have in our brain holdover rules from 4th edition that don't actually exist in 5th edition, right? And so there's some things where like we don't even notice that we're doing that wrong until a new player joins the table and points out that we are all looking at this one rule really strangely. Or I'll notice a tweet from, like Chris Perkins or something being like, hey, you're all doing this wrong. Stop.
Oh no, what do we do?
You're all playing Monopoly wrong. Spoilers.
But so to that end as well, like these things do kind of like stick with you and get ingrained in you. And it's not again, I'll be the first person to be like, it doesn't really matter if you're playing it exactly to the letter by the rules. Like that's fine. Homebrew rules are great. And we use them in exactly these circumstances. We're like, well, I actually really like the way inspiration works when we do it like this. So we're going to do it like that. But at the same time, like if you start the game with a homebrew character, I don't know. It'd be like if you started Animal Crossing with like a billion bells and you got to do everything right away. Like I don't know. Like there's a little bit of like you don't know how the game is meant to be played at that point.
Do you go to a 5-star restaurant in the Michelin Guide and ask for salt.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. Just
You
give
see
it a
how
chance.
the meal is prepared first.
Yeah.
So here's the deal, right? First of all, I want to say welcome to Thormy Saves, who just followed, and welcome to the Baby Bards. We're excited to have you. We're talking about D&D, which is basically
cool.
all we ever do on this channel. So stick around. What I will say, my thought on homebrewing a character at the beginning is that it pretty much what Chris said. It is, there are so many options and so many subclasses that they can work towards. The odds are that you're going to make a decision that seems like a really cool idea in the beginning, but becomes totally broken because there are people who have been hired to test for balance already, and they don't always get it totally right, but it is literally their jobs to play these classes and test them out and then release Unearthed Arcana subclasses for other people to play test and see how it goes.
Listen,
the final goes.
All I'm saying is I'm gonna continue playing Twilight Cleric with the Unearthed Arcana rules until I die. I much prefer
Revised Ranger. That's all I'm gonna say.
D8 instead of the D4 or whatever. Like, it's fine.
Yeah. No. Every time I've like introduced like a homebrew rule just because like a player like really wanted that little extra something, it's been busted as all heck.
Yeah. It can really get away from you.
Yeah.
Even with the best intentions. So the only way in which I would do it, because I think that everybody, like if you love homebrewing shit and you want to do that at your table, you should do it, because it's one of the things that's going to make your DM experience for your players unique. So don't let me throw you off it if that's what you want to do. Yeah. But I would say that you could be making a bigger problem for yourself down the line, so you're like, that's a problem for future me. Or maybe that's just like the way you do it and you live with it and you make things harder for them in other ways. But yeah, that's kind of it.
It's like if everyone at all the things that we're saying don't do beginning players, if everyone at the table wants to do it and that's your best life, then do whatever you want. But
like whatever makes your cookies, go for it.
But just everyone's got to be on board if you want to play fast and loose like that.
You came here to hear our opinions, so we're giving them to you.
Our opinions are your fun is wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Just kidding. Never.
Another thing, there are two other things that I had wanted to point out about like how to make DMs feel great. One of them is tell them what you liked about the session. 10 out of 10 DMs will be like, thanks for coming, guys. I hope you had fun. And 9 out of 10 players will say, yeah, it was fun. I don't believe that. This may be more of a me problem, but I think it's really helpful, especially for beginner DMs, if there was something specific that you liked, like I liked being a horse girl today, or like I really liked that combat. Just tell them. It's not like you have to effusively shower them with praise, but definitely give them something that they brought, like, ooh, I really liked this character, or I hope we run into that guy again. Like really helpful.
When I started playing with my with some of my coworkers at my previous job, they were all but like one of them were like brand new to the hobby. But after we finished every session, as we were walking to the subway or whatever, we would all say, like, everyone had to say, what was your favorite thing that happened tonight, including the DM, and everyone got to like pick their favorite thing. And I think that worked really well because it informed me a lot, who is the DM, as to like what things I should key in on.
Yeah. So true. GMs are like fairies. They only exist if you believe and feed their egos.
As a person who plays under the GM-age of both of these people, I'm picking up on a vibe. I'm getting it.
Yeah,
Emily,
I get it.
I don't feel appreciated.
Give you better feedback at the end of sessions.
Listen, if I'm going to craft a world for you, I need you to at least tell me I'm pretty.
We're holding a whole world up here in our heads.
Yeah.
What, you think it's easy?
Yeah. And you don't know which of your abilities is a bonus action?
It's so crazy. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to point out is, this goes for not just beginner DMs, but literally anyone. Like Chris said, there's the element of know your class, know what it does, do your very best to be prepared. For me, it's also polls respond. If they're asking you questions about availability or saying, hey, can you get me these three answers to these 3 questions about your backstory by Friday, like, just do it. It's so hard to make a world for you. No, it's so hard to do that.
Emily was receding into the bush as me and Anne are just all like, you know what I hate about players? If you don't want me to hate you, don't do this.
Bye.
Maybe prepare. I spend all week preparing, and then you just show up and you don't even know where your dice are.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where like just respond to me. If I ask for your availability, just read and respond. Because if I have to chase you down, or like if you're gonna quit, just quit. I won't be mad. Like, just communicate with me.
Yep.
If we need to have a conversation, just have that conversation. That will honestly make beginner DMs and all DMs feel better because you want to communicate about the game. It proves you care about the game.
I'll bring up to get us off of the GM gripe fest, which I could easily continue,
Emily.
But I will say this:
It's a different show.
If you are a new player, something you should, a pro tip, something you need to come to terms with very quickly is that you are going to fail at 50% of the things that you try, like in the game, like especially in D&D, success and failure is very binary. And losing or being bad at a game doesn't feel good, and rolling a 2 is nothing. There's nothing you can do about that. And so and I found I've been stuck in the same thing too, is that when you fail a roll, it's really hard. Sometimes it can be really hard to move past it and just sit there and dwell on your failure. But the best thing is to just keep the ball rolling. There's a lot of other people, and there's a lot of things that you can do in the game that aren't tied to dice rolls, like engaging and RPing and helping out with fleshing out the narrative or the flavor of everything that you're doing. Because just because your character rolled a 2 doesn't mean they're no longer present. They don't disappear.
My character's president now.
But they're I
mean, when was I president?
But you know what I mean? Like you it's just like how I've tried to introduce rules where, like, when you're at 0 hit points, your character is not unconscious. They just have to spend their turn focusing on not dying. So you can still feel like you can contribute to the game even if you're not succeeding at a dice roll.
Totally.
But it's really hard to it's really easy to sort of tunnel vision on the dice rolls because there's so much focus on that in the fandom. But that's not what the game is about.
So I did want to kind of start to like come to an ending here. Is like we've been giving people a lot of tips for, you know, how to handle new players, both as GMs and as players, player characters. But I think one of the things that having new players at your table does is it, you know, says, I am willing to do the work that it helps to give somebody, that it takes to give somebody a good time. It is an act of generosity. It is an act of openness. It is an act of invitation. And through that act, you can learn a lot, because new players will try stuff that people who take the system and the game for granted a little bit, because we played it a while, won't try or discover to learn. Or try to learn, rather. So why don't we share a story, our favorite stories about having new players at the table? Can anybody think of a new player given story? I have one to start us out.
Yeah, go ahead.
The three of us have a really good friend named Agatha. Agatha has the... Everybody's like, we've heard this one.
Damn, you took the best story. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Well, we can all participate. We can all share in this telling. So basically, Agatha is someone who is very investigative. She's very intelligent. She is nerdy in a lot of ways, but was very on the outside of our descent into Dungeons and Dragons obsession. But eventually, she's the kind of person who wants to know what's going on in your life. And I think she was interested in knowing what goes on behind closed doors. And we invited her to play D&D with us. Chris, what was it like helping Agatha roll a character? How did she approach that process?
So Agatha had a very specific... So Agatha is like a conceptualize... and execute. Yeah, it's conceptualize and execute. And so she had conceptualized what she thought this game was and what she thought it was about and what she wanted to do with herself once she got into that world. And
I can't do this.
And every level of resistance was unacceptable. And when I say level of resistance, I mean when I said you can't do that, and she'd be like, but I want to. That's what my character is. And so it was
Yeah.
just very interesting. But it was interesting at a certain point where like she made certain choices. So like her whole thing was like she was like, I want to be a vampire, and I was like, well, it's not really like a character class. And she was like, yeah, but I want to be a vampire. And I was like, okay, but if you're a vampire,
How can I
yes,
become one?
yes, but what do I roll to strip? Which is the quote that we say every single day.
Also from Agatha.
Although, yeah, literally that same session. What do I roll to strip? But what was really funny actually was so it was like, okay, you're a vampire. So just so you know, if you're a vampire, you're gonna have to drink blood every day. Are you gonna like kill people? And she's like, no, I don't want to kill people. I'll like get donations because I'm really sexy, or I will like use animal blood.
And she'll have a reason, right? She'll be like, I'll get donations because I'm very sexy. Like, I will win because I'm strong and I'm a vampire. It's all thought out.
Also, it's very important to establish that she was of the mind that there was a winning to this game.
Yes.
So she
No, that's the punchline
That's
of
the-
the
I'm sorry.
story.
I'm sorry.
Everyone forget you heard that part.
Okay,
Continue.
fair enough. I'm sorry. You wanted me to talk about it. So
I know. I told you to. I was trying to share in the best story we have.
Well, whatever. Anyway, the part of it that I was sorry I ruined everything. The part of it I was going to say that I thought was fascinating was, she was a vampire, so she had to do this whole. She had to get blood and drink it and all this stuff. But as we slowly introduced the rules and the roles and the kind of hoops that she would have to jump through to achieve all of this busy work to be a vampire, she just slowly became disillusioned with the idea of being a vampire. And she's like, I don't want to be a vampire anymore. This is too much work.
Yeah.
Like, I thought the idea of being this cute, sexy vampire would be cool. But now, like, I got to hide this blood and, like, buy stuff. I don't have any money.
It was just really funny because like she would be great at RP for the most part because she really had a sense of who she was.
Oh
in
yeah,
her
yeah,
mind.
yeah.
It was just when the dice defined her very clearly defied her clearly delineated plans. That's when there was a disconnect. And at some point we had played maybe 4 or 5 sessions. So we're talking hours and hours of D&D to this person for whom, like, the closest they had gotten was a board game and watching people play World of Warcraft. And she goes, wait a second. Chris. And then she steepled her fingers and she said, all this is wonderful, really. But, how do I win?
Yeah.
And she's like looking down at
And then it all
grid,
became very
and
clear.
we were like, this game isn't for
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
She was just waiting till we got to that point. She's like,
Yeah, like
It was
I
such
think
a
she
hard
thought,
stop too, because as soon as I was like,
Yeah.
there is no winning this game, she was just like, oh, then I'm sort of done.
I'm done.
I've
Yeah,
played this
I should-
enough.
I should be specific with the fact that like we weren't like, this game isn't for you. She ejected herself
Yeah.
from the game.
Yeah, she was
like,
giving
I
it.
thought this was
she did
a
her-
longer format board.
Yeah,
game.
she did her due diligence, and then we were like, she's like, wait a second, so we're going to play this every week for how long? And I was like, until we're done. And she's like, well, then how do I win? And I was like, there is no winning. We just play until we're done. She's like, but if no one wins, how are we done? How do
Yeah,
we know?
what is
How do we
done
know
mean?
when it's done if no one
And
wins?
we're like, have you ever read a book that you've never wanted to finish? And in classic Agatha fashion, she says, no,
because
books end.
Yeah, books end. That's how stories go. They end eventually.
Yeah, like I love her so much.
Listen,
but-
listen. At the end of the day, we're all Agatha because you tell me how many campaigns you've actually finished in your decades
Yeah.
of playing Dungeons and Dragons.
100%.
All stories just sort of peter out when everyone's just kind of done playing them.
Yeah, it's so true. And I feel like, yeah, it's very interesting. It's interesting. And I think she, as a newer player, really presented us with like a perspective on how it was we were spending our days, if that makes sense. And new players can do that. There's also people who just like make really cool decisions about how they're gonna do certain things. Like a really good example from my Strahd game is that my friend Lee was like, I want to play a monk, and she's an elf and she has a bow. And I was just kind of like, play what you want, but me in my like experience brain was like, you're never gonna use that bow. Like, in what world is this monk ever not gonna be running on walls and punching things? In my mind, I thought this. And there was a time where we had to chase down like a flying archon in the air, and she ran faster than the rest of us, ran up, like not climbed, ran up the vertical surface of a tree and perched at the top and shot him out of the air and killed him with her bow. And I was like, I take it back. I'm so stupid. you're the smart one. Like moments like that, I think it's like, you know, min-maxing can seem like such a given, and like I'm so glad we have things now like Tasha's Cauldron of Everything that allow us to make more varied choices for lineages and things like that in D&D, because it does become like you pick this because it supports it, and then you're done. You got a cleric. Can sometimes happen when you've been playing for a while. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I've found that I have a lot of new players who basically discover that they wanted to play something else while playing a character they've already made. You know, like they'll be like, this is the coolest thing I could this is the coolest combination that I could create given the options available to me. And then once they're introduced to the world and they like meet a new thing or interact with an NPC and they're like, oh no, I want that. I want that thing now. Like that's the new shiny.
Totally.
That happens often. Yeah. I don't know if that's really what you asked. Sorry.
I mean, that's fine. It's good. Guys, this was super fun. This is a great conversation. We have many more conversations to come with me and Emily and Chris and a bunch of other friendos here. So you can always find Around the Hearth right here on Hearthsinger Games at 6 p.m. Eastern every Friday. If listening is more your speed, you can, of course, get the exclusive access to the podcast format of this show on my Patreon, which I will throw in chat right now. If you are interested in the Lost Mountain Saga, which I mentioned earlier, you can find that at lostmountainsaga.com. And you can check out my YouTube, where I put out new videos every Wednesday, more short format than this. Every Wednesday, I take on a new tabletop RPG sort of tip, a tip topic. I was like, this is very weird in my mouth. That's what she said. And so, yeah, you can join us next week. We'll be here. We'll announce the topic usually a couple days before. If you guys have the desire to get in touch or follow Emily or Chris, you can see their Twitter handles on the screen right now, as well as mine. So please come hang out with us, ask us questions. And if you have ideas for future shows or things you have burning quests for knowledge regarding, well, we'd love to be the person who solves that for you, the people who solve it for you, the bestie unit. Do you guys have any final words or thoughts before we sign off? Chris looks terrified.
I always do when put on the spot.
I guess my final words are the subject of this conversation was like advice for new players or how to make new players comfortable, and I think it can really be summed up with the title of this episode: make beginner D&D players feel welcome.
Yeah.
Do that and you succeed in making this hobby a better place.
Yep.
And make it something you actively think about and not something you're like, oh, I hope I made them feel comfortable after the fact.
Yeah.
Make it a part of your process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
D&D.
Awesome, guys.
D&D is for everyone. There you go.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, I'm going to ask that you guys get out there and live your quest life. And I will see you next Tuesday. All right, guys. Have a great weekend. Bye.